You're now listening to the Fantasy Filler Podcast, where we put you in the driver's seat every week, all year long. In the NASCAR racing world, from top news stories, latest results, and best fantasy lineups, we'll have you up to speed and out in front before the drop of the green flag. So let's dive in with our host, Vanilla Wafers.
The West Coast swing is now over, meaning NASCAR will go back to the East Coast, where they will race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, the fifth race of the 2023 season, and already the second race with the superspeedway package. There's a lot to talk about here at Atlanta Motor Speedway, including moving the pit road entrance. It will not be in its regular spot that we're used to seeing. It has moved to a different spot, as well as some big penalties that have been handed down to some drivers and teams throughout the week. We will cover that as well as our top fantasy picks, all on today's episode of the Fantasy Filler Podcast. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Hopefully you're wearing some green, and be safe, but have a good time here on this Friday as we go into the fifth race of the 2023 season, and it's at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Some interesting things popping up here at this racetrack. First and foremost, we do have rain in the area, so we are not going to be having qualifying or practice for the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series. I think only one team was affected by that, which was the number 74 of CHK Racing. However, in the Truck Series, they only had 36 trucks entered in, so they will be all good to go there. So that's a little bit of a bummer for anyone down there at Atlanta Motor Speedway, but rest assured, you will probably not have to deal with rain on Saturday and Sunday, because it looks like the percentage of precipitation in the area will be about 5%. So I think we're going to be fine there. But yes, we are now back at Atlanta Motor Speedway, one of the more controversial mile-and-a-half tracks since the redesign of the track. Personally, I enjoy it. Hopefully, it just stays at Atlanta Motor Speedway, because it's definitely unique, but not something that should be duplicated to multiple racetracks. And since it's so unique, NASCAR has decided to change the pit road entrance. This is something very important to talk about, because you're going to want to definitely know this before Sunday's race, or even the Truck Series and Xfinity Series race, because pit road entrance is not the exit of turn 4. As you guys remember last year at Atlanta, that was the most hectic thing, was going down pit road on a green flag run. And NASCAR clearly saw that, and they wanted to move it all the way back to the entrance of turn number 3, meaning people will be going down the back straightaway to enter pit road and will be at pit road speed going around the corner. The only word I can use for this rule change is interesting. And I know I say interesting a lot, but this is very, very interesting, because now we're going to be having cars going down the back straightaway, slowing down to pit road speed, entering turn 3, and riding around the apron. Now, some of the concerns are this. 1, green flag pit stops. If you go down pit road during a green flag stop and some people stay out and a caution happens, I don't think you're just going to go 1 lap down. You might go 2 laps down. I don't think people realize how long they're going to be going that slow around the corner. So there's going to be a lot of fear making green flag pit stops. And 2, I think this is the one that people are really concerned about. Imagine when we're doing green flag pit stops, you have multiple cars go down on the apron, and then you have some people still jockeying for position on the racetrack. They're not going to go down pit road yet, and someone gets forced down the white and red line, also the double yellow line. Yes, Atlanta Motor Speedway has the double yellow line rule, but technically it's not the double yellow line, because there's no double yellow lines. It's white and red. It's confusing. Basically, don't go under it. You're going to get penalized, and it will have a controversial finish, just like Talladega and Daytona always has. Anyways, went off on a tangent there. My bad. But let's say you're in the middle of a green flag run, and these guys are jockeying for position, and someone gets forced down below that line. There could be a chance that we have someone get creamed going into turn 4 and only driving 45 miles per hour by someone going 160. I don't think that's going to happen, and also to keep in mind, that's kind of what we were seeing anyways while they were trying to go into pit road on turns 4. It's still definitely a concerning thing. Either way, you got to keep that in mind, that the pit road entrance is going to be in a completely different area than what we're used to seeing. The only place I can describe it close to is Martinsville. Martinsville has it on the entrance of turn number 3, but that's a half-mile racetrack. This is technically a super speedway now, 1.5 miles, so keep that one in mind going into these races here at Atlanta. Should be very interesting to see, to say the least. We also had some big news coming from Phoenix Raceway. Before we had Sunday's race, pre-race inspections, there was something very interesting that was found on the number 31 of Kaulig Racing and all of Hendrick Motorsports. The louvers on the cars that are provided from NASCAR's mandated single-source supplier did not match the design submitted by the manufacturer and approved by NASCAR, meaning that these 5 teams suffered an L2 level infraction for unapproved modifications to parts, and we know how bad those penalties are. The number 5, 9, 24, and 31, and 48 team all lost 100 team and driver points, as well as 10 playoff points. The only exception was with the number 9, as they don't lose any driver points since Chase Elliott is out of the car right now, so he wasn't really at that race, so he can't really get penalized for that, and Josh Berry's not running for points. So they're kind of in a different situation regarding that number 9 car. But the crew chiefs for each of those teams, including the 9 car, will be suspended for 4 races and fined $100,000 each. $100,000 each. Just to give you guys an idea, the biggest penalty ever given was back in 2013 with Michael Waltrip Racing after Spingate. You guys all remember Spingate. They altered the positions. You had the number 15 of Clint Boyer say he had an itch on his arm, spun out randomly just by himself. And then you also had Brian Vickers reportedly, quote unquote, have a flat. He had to go down pit road, giving him just enough points for Martin Truex Jr. to advance into the playoffs that year, and also eliminated the 4-time champion at Jeff Gordon. It was a very controversial thing. What ended was a $300,000 fine for the team and loss of many team and driver points there. This one is even worse for Hendrick Motorsports, $400,000 and suspensions for 4 of their crew chiefs. So every single crew chief here in the Hendrick Motorsports camp is going to be sitting at home for the next 4 weeks. Unbelievable news here. This is absolutely crazy. This puts, I think, Kyle Larson now below people like Cody Ware. That's how many points they lost. From someone who's almost in the top, I think, 5 in driver points, is now in dead last, thanks to these penalties. Alex Bowman, he was second in the points overall, only behind Ross Chastain. All those points he has gotten in the first 4 races is almost completely gone. All that momentum just right there hits a brick wall, and now they're right back behind almost everyone that they have been dominating almost every single race. And like I said, the only one that's not getting affected that much at Hendrick Motorsports is Chase Elliott, but he's missing 6 races, so he's already losing a bunch of points there as it is. Now, the most interesting thing about this is not the Hendrick cars, but rather the number 31 car with Kaulig Racing, because these guys are a 2-car team. They have the number 31 and number 16. Hell, depending on what kind of race it is, they could have 3 cars. They've been bringing in the number 13 car for the Daytona 500. It looks like they're bringing that car back once again for the Bristol Dirt Race. Only one of their cars, of the 2 Lovers, I think I'm saying that right, Lovers, I think it's Lovers, was confiscated, which shows inconsistency in the parts provided to the teams from NASCAR's single source supplier, providing no competitive advantage. They may have a case here. Now, it is heard that they may have gotten these parts from Hendrick Motorsports. I cannot confirm that 100%. I've been hearing that rumor flying around all between the NASCAR channels. I've been listening to Dave Moody and all those guys, and that keeps popping up. Did the 31 team get this from Hendrick Motorsports? I don't exactly know. I'd have to do more diving on that. But either way, they are going to try to appeal this L2 penalty, which they might have actually a good case on their hands, because like we said, only one car failed pre-race inspection, but the other car didn't. So what in the world's going on there? Hendrick Motorsports, I think, might be in big trouble. Chak announces, talking a game, that, oh yeah, they're going to try to appeal it. They're going to do everything they can. And maybe he's right. Maybe they're going to be able to win it over. They did get lucky with William Byron last year. Actually, they get really lucky with a lot of penalties they get handed to them. Not saying anything there, but they're going to try to appeal this as well. But they do have some crew chiefs that are going to be stepping in as substitutes for the ones who are missing these next 4 races in case they are not able to get back up on the pit box. Those ones being Kevin Mendering. He will be replacing Cliff Daniels in the number 5 machine. Tom Gray will be working with Josh Berry, replacing Alan Gustafson. Brian Camp will work with the number 24 team, replacing Rudy Fogel. And Greg Ives is making his great return with Alex Bowman, replacing Blake Harris. Out of all those names, Greg Ives is definitely the most exciting one. We'll see how he does if he has to stay up there for 4 races. Hopefully they do really good. Hopefully there's a click, and maybe, just maybe, they'll get that surprise win that the 48 team always seems to get each and every year. Now, that's not the only penalties that were given down by NASCAR after the Phoenix race. There was also a 2-race suspension for 2 crew members for the number team of Stewart-Haas Racing, with Eric Almirola with the tire just basically coming off completely. I think it was due to a loss or separation of improper installed tires, but even then, it just looked like a weird incident. Regardless, they are getting a penalty for it, and 2 of the crew members will be suspended for 2 races. They also got their 2-lap penalty within the race. There won't be any further penalties given to this team except for the loss of 2 crew members. And the biggest one that got a lot of people up in arms early in the week was NASCAR fined Denny Hamlin $50,000 and docked him 25 driver points on Wednesday for his intentional contact with Ross Chastain late in Sunday's Cup Series race at Phoenix. Now, we talked about this in the last episode. Everyone saw it clear as day. If you went on social media, Twitter, you saw that Denny Hamlin was running into that one car left and right in those final 2 laps. He knew he wasn't going to win the race, so he decided to take Ross Chastain with him. On his podcast, he admits to letting go of the wheel and saying, whatever happens, happens. And if he's going to go down, he's going to be taking Ross Chastain with him. Is it a punk move? Yes. Did it deserve this penalty? I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm not the biggest Denny Hamlin fan. He is a great guy off the racetrack. Whenever I say I'm not a big fan of these drivers, I'm not a big fan of them as a driver on the track. Most of these guys off the track that seem to get booed a lot are some of the nicest people in the world. Example, Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano. Nicest people you could find in the garage area. But anyways, going way off topic. Denny Hamlin is unfortunately one of those drivers that gets into a lot of bad luck no matter where it is, especially with the William Byron and Denny Hamlin incident back at Texas Motor Speedway. Remember when William Byron spun him out in the middle of caution on the front straightaway, and he had to go to the back? He couldn't even take his position back, and Byron got the 25-point penalty, and NASCAR said, nope, we heard the appeal. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. Just a $100,000 fine. Just give us some money. Just give us some money. And now Denny Hamlin does something where he doesn't wreck someone under caution, doesn't even junk the car. He just knocks him out of the way, ruins his race, but not to the point where they destroy cars, and he still gets a 25-point driver penalty. Now, comparing this to the William Byron incident is still, in a way, comparing apples to oranges, because I think what NASCAR got really upset about was the fact that, A, this has been going on for a very long time. I think at this point it's been going on for a year, and B, he straight up admits it. Bubba Wallace did this when he caused a caution in the number 43 car a few years back, and he was proud of it. He said to a reporter, like, yeah, I caused a caution. I did what I was supposed to do. What of it? And he got penalized for that one. So maybe that's the route they're going with this, because Denny Hamlin, he made it clear what he was trying to do. He was trying to ruin Ross Chastain's race, and they called it actions detrimental to NASCAR. Ironically, that's Denny Hamlin's podcast, so I bet you that was some good marketing moves for Denny Hamlin in a way. Not for his sponsor, FedEx, but for his podcast, sure. Now, he is going to try to appeal it, saying it was just hard racing. We'll see what happens here. But if he does not win this appeal, I'm going to feel really, really bad for the Denny Hamlin fans, because I get your pain right now. I'm a huge William Byron fan, and even then I thought to myself, I think Byron should have got that penalty after admitting that. But I don't think Denny Hamlin should get this penalty. Should NASCAR step in future events like this? I personally believe yes, they do. I think if there's an incident that goes on during the race, handle it at the race. I mean, near the end of the race, there's not much you can do. But during the time, if someone's hard racing like that Denny Hamlin did, black flag him, make him go down a lap. Same thing with Byron doing that in the middle of a race. Black flag him, make him lose a lap. They deserve that. If there is an intentional spin out, then maybe something like this happens. You dock them 25 points, give them a $50,000 fine. Now, if you junk a car, like just no second thought to junk your car and their car, like the Bubba Wallace incident, that's a suspension. That is a straight suspension right there. And I think they handled that one correctly. They just have to be really consistent with this. We'll see how the appeal goes, but I'm hoping NASCAR stays consistent with this. They're being very consistent with the L2 infractions. I can appreciate that. But we shall see what will happen here with Denny Hamlin and his situation after the appeal process. So big penalties here after the fourth race of the season. Absolutely wild. If you weren't keeping up with news, oh boy, you missed some big stuff here this weekend. Another thing to talk about here real quickly before we get into our fantasy picks. I know we're going a little too long here on the news segment, but Kevin Harvick is going to run the number 29 car at the All-Star race in tribute of his first Cup win. Look up this paint scheme for Kevin Harvick for the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro. Looks just like his car from 2001, maybe a little bit more of a silver look instead of the white look on the 29 car, but it looks incredible. They're going to be making die-cast cars. If you have an opportunity to get a die-cast car, go and get it. This is definitely going to be one you don't want to miss. But what a great callback. Good job to Stuart Haas Racing. Good job to Richard Childress Racing for making this happen so Kevin Harvick can have the All-Star race and to commemorate his first ever win in NASCAR in that number 29 machine. That would be super great to see at such an iconic racetrack in NASCAR that's finally being brought back from the dead for almost 26, 27 years. So big news here, both positive and negative, and as well as the race even going in. It's gonna be absolutely nuts to see what happens here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. But before we dive into the race, we gotta make sure we get the right fantasy picks here for this weekend. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone here as a special guest for today's episode. I was hoping to have some people on. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. Maybe since it's St. Patrick's Day, everyone's having themselves a little bit of extra fun. And I'm just like, all right, I'll have some fun later because I'm in the West Coast. They're in the East Coast right now, so I don't want to take that away from them. So it's just going to be me today. Good old-fashioned, the same way. 2 out of 5 ain't bad for just having myself. We are going to talk about the top 15 drivers you want for your fantasy roster here this weekend. Which drivers are good, which drivers you want to stay away from, and which drivers do you want to save for other races. Without further ado, let's dive into it. These will be our top picks for the Ambetter Health 400 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. 36 cars are on the entry list, and everyone has their primary drivers back in the cars once again. Todd Gilliland will be driving the number 38 car, and you'll have J.J. Yaley making his return to the number 15 Ford. The only car that does not have their primary driver will be the number 9 machine, of course, with Josh Berry behind the wheel. Here at Atlanta Motor Speedway, we're going to be looking at just only certain types of tracks, which will be Talladega, Daytona, and of course, this track from last year, Atlanta. We're not going to be comparing other intermediate tracks since this track runs more as a super speedway rather than a racetrack like Las Vegas or Charlotte Motor Speedway. Each driver can only be used 10 times in the regular season, so only 10 times out of 26 races can you use each driver. Got to be smart here with your picks. So we're going to start off with the top picks. These are drivers that not only do we believe can do really good as far as getting fantasy points, but they could be contenders for the victory. Starting off on this list, let's include a Chevrolet to get us going since they have been absolutely dominant here in the 2023 season. I think the easiest one you got to go with has been a guy who's been really consistent at almost all the super speedways. He got a win at Talladega earlier in the 2022 season, and he finished second here both times in the Atlanta race last year. You got to throw Ross Chastain on your fantasy roster. Really good here at super speedways. There's a chance he might take out a driver or two. He's been notorious for doing that. I think he did at both Atlanta races last year, but stayed up front for the most part in that race. Led 32 laps in the spring race and 42 laps in the summer race. Really good around here. And like I said, he won the race at Talladega during the spring of 2022. He led 6 laps in the Daytona 500, finished in the top 10. Just all around a very consistent driver that you can rely on here this weekend. There's no question in my mind. Ross Chastain is definitely a top pick and will be running for the victory at some point here in this race. Another driver you got to include here, it's my favorite driver. You got to include the number 24 of William Byron. Now, William Byron has been kind of one of those drivers you don't want to go with when it comes to Daytona and Talladega, but for some reason here at Atlanta, he has been good. And not just good, really good. It's been the best season that we have ever seen for this 24 car with William Byron behind the wheel. He won Las Vegas. He won Phoenix. They got all the momentum in the world. But let's look at last year here at Atlanta. Yes, he was involved in an incident in the summer race where he finished 30th. But the spring race, he was able to win it. And he led 111 laps with an average running position of 5th. Incredible performance on his end. He also led 41 laps in the summer race as well, so he was up front for the most part in that race. At Talladega, He has been able to lead laps in those races as well. Unfortunately, he has not been able to get a top 10 in the 2022 season, but he still led 1 in 38 laps. So super speedways are good. He's just definitely one of the more riskier ones. With that being said, consistency and momentum works so well for teams in NASCAR, and you gotta feel that the 24 team still has a lot of momentum. Even though Rudy Fogel will not be on the pit box here this weekend, I still think that 24 car is going to be fast. It's been mostly ran by Rudy Fogel throughout the week, just unfortunately won't be there on race day. So they're not going to win it on a pit strategy. They'll have to win it out on the racetrack, but I still believe William Byron will be a top pick here for this weekend. We've talked about Chevrolets. Let's include a Ford and let's include a Toyota. Now, usually in this situation, I would like to include Joey Logano as a top pick for super speedways. Hell, sometimes maybe even to take a chance, but what we've seen in the last few races just hasn't been that spectacular for him, so it worries me. Someone who did give me a little bit more comfort, however, was the number 12 of Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney has shown that, hey, he's out of his little slump that he had earlier in the first couple of races, and now he's looking like the old Ryan Blaney that we're used to seeing here at the beginning of the season. Really good run at Phoenix. And super speedway still very consistent. He can have the most torn up, junked race car out on the track and still finish in the top 10. Still a reliable driver. He's not like Joey Logano where there's a chance, yeah, he might win a stage or two, but he's going to wreck in the third stage. No, Ryan Blaney will usually score you quite a few stage points and also be there at the end. At Atlanta, he was running around the top 10 almost the entire race, led a few laps. Talladega, same thing. Really good at super speedways. If you want someone on the Ford camp who's been very consistent when it comes to these types of racetracks, Ryan Blaney is your guy. He has some momentum on his hand, so things are looking good for that number 12 team going into this weekend. Now let's include a Toyota here. There are a lot of options to go with. I think most people would suspect that someone like Denny Hamlin would be a top pick here for this weekend, but I wouldn't say that. I really would not say that. And some people might also say Martin Truex Jr. Again, I see good results in the past. It just has not been the case. I think for this weekend, we're going to go with the number 20 of Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell is the leading Toyota over there at Joe Gibbs Racing. Of course, Denny Hamlin's right there, right by his heels, but Christopher Bell has really shown some great results. And he's also been really good here at Atlanta. He's similar with William Byron. If he stays out of trouble, he will be running up front. He really will be. Because last year, the Atlanta race, unfortunately finished 19th and 23rd. His average running position was 9th and 11th. Even though he had bad finishes, his average running position was still within the top 10. Led 16 laps in the spring race. So he does have those strong cars. It's just, can he stay out of trouble? That is the concerning issue. And so, unfortunately, when it comes to these super speedway races, every driver is a risk. Some drivers obviously can avoid the trouble, and then there's some drivers who could either do really good, but at the same time fall apart. And I think, unfortunately, for Christopher Bell, he's in that same spot. But I see a higher ceiling for him than the other drivers that we talked about in the Toyota camp. So I think the top pick for Toyotas is going to be Christopher Bell. One more driver here in the top 5 for the top picks. There's a lot of good options here. I think it's best to stay with the Chevrolets, and it's going to be a teammate of one of the drivers we already talked about, and that is going to be the number 99 of Daniel Suarez. You do not think about Daniel Suarez when it comes to super speedway races. Let's be honest here. If we're going to think about anyone from Trackhouse Racing at super speedways, it's going to be Ross Chastain. But I'm telling you, Daniel Suarez has been super impressive at super speedways lately. Last year at Atlanta, he finished 6th and 4th. Not nearly as good as Ross Chastain, but still right around the top 5 mix and discussion the entire race. The Daytona 500, he finished 7th in that race. Remember that. Talladega, he led 28 laps before getting caught up in an incident there. And then in the spring race, he finished in the top 10, showing a lot of consistency and a lot of potential to get you some good fantasy points. I think for the most part, you do want to take some risk on some drivers. There's going to be a risk for everyone. But for the most part, you also want some super consistent drivers here in case everything goes bad for your team. And I think right now Trackhouse Racing has been more of the consistent, safer picks to go with when it comes to these types of races. Will they be involved in a wreck? There might be a chance. I don't think it's going to be Daniel Suarez. It might be Ross Chastain. However, if they can keep the car mostly clean, they will be there at the end. So those are our top picks here for the Ambetter 400 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. We have the number 1 of Ross Chastain, the number 24 of William Byron, the number 12 of Ryan Blaney, the number 20 of Christopher Bell, and the number 99 of Daniel Suarez. Now, usually the top picks are usually the easiest ones to distinguish. I mean, we kind of expect real quickly who are going to be drivers running for the victory. And they're pretty easy to put in your number 1, number 2 spots. Here, between spots number 3, 4, and 5 for your fantasy rosters, things get a little tougher. In these next 5 drivers we feel like can finish around the top 10 as far as fantasy points go. They may not be able to finish in the top 10 per se, but as far as points go, getting stage points in 1 and 2, they could help you out and could put you near the top of your fantasy league. And this is going to be a little bit more difficult because I'm looking at this list here. Every driver has a blemish somewhere on their resume at this point. So it's going to be really hard to distinguish which ones are good picks and which ones are fakes. I think one we should include as a good pick, even though he didn't make it in the top picks, and I did kind of bag on him for his rough start to the beginning of the season. Let's include Joey Logano. There was one race he did really good at, and it just so happened to be the Daytona 500. Now, most of the time, I never included him as a top pick because he was never able to finish a race. I kid you not. He had all these stage points, but never a top 10 finish, and it drove me absolutely crazy. Now, here in the Daytona race, he finishes second. He leads 12 laps, average running position right around the top 10, showing that he is very consistent. Last year at Atlanta, he did get one top 10 finish after leading 12 laps, running around on average in the 13th position, which is not bad for a super speedway race. I think out of people who can score stage points, he is definitely one of the strongest contenders. So yes, there is fear around him. I understand that, especially after Vegas and Phoenix, where we thought we knew he was going to be doing great, and that just wasn't the case. But with that being said, there was still one racetrack that he was doing really good at, and it was a super speedway race. So keep an eye on him in practice and qualifying. If he does show that speed, then obviously he's going to be running really good. Usually when he qualifies inside the top 5 is when he has a top 10 finish. Keep that one in mind. So Joey Logano, even though I don't know if he's going to be winning this race, he still is a top pick thanks to how strong he is during the middle of these super speedway races. Next up, we have some Fords coming up here right with Joey Logano. I think we got to really consider and include the number 6 of Brad Keselowski just by how well he's been running here at the beginning of the season. Still, his strongest tracks have been the super speedways. It was like that last year, and it looks to be the same this year, except way stronger equipment. Brad Keselowski unfortunately did not get a top 10 finish, missed a gear on the restart at Phoenix, and then the Daytona race, he led 42 laps, definitely looked like he was going to be the best person behind maybe Kyle Busch to win the Daytona 500. Unfortunately, he gets caught up in an incident there as well, but we really got to consider Brad Keselowski as a good contender here in this race. Whatever RFK has found here during the offseason, it has really worked for this team because they have been running around the top 10, especially with the number 6 car. You got to rely on him being a good fantasy pick here for this weekend. I think right around the 3rd spot will be best, and right behind him in the 4th spot and the 3rd one overall here in the pretty good category will be his teammate, the number 17 of Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher tends to be really good at super speedways. I talk about him a lot when it comes to Talladega and Daytona. I got to put him in the same conversation when it comes to Atlanta because both those races, well, the spring race, he kind of struggled in that one. But in the summer race, he finished 7th with an average running position of 15 right around the top 10. And this race just is going to lean towards more people who do good at super speedways. And Chris Buescher has been one of those drivers. I think Brad Keselowski is now the top driver there at RFK here at the beginning of the season. But similar to Trackhouse Racing, Ross Chastain will be number 1, but Daniel Suarez will be close behind in number 2. For this team, Brad Keselowski will be number 1, but expect the number 17 car to be right behind him in being the second strongest car, just a few spots back. Still worth a spot on your fantasy roster here for this weekend. 2 more spots to go. We got some interesting options here. I think you got to include Bubba Wallace in this mix. Bubba Wallace does definitely include a spot here. It's crazy to think that Denny Hamlin or Bubba Wallace were not top picks for me. But there's a reason why Bubba Wallace has fallen off a little bit here. I still think he's a good option to go with when it comes to super speedways. He hasn't finished in the top 10 in the last 5 super speedway races. I think he finished in the top 10 in the Daytona race in the summer, but looking at his Atlanta, the 2023 Daytona 500, and both of the Talladega races, best finish at 13th. Little bit concerning. At the same time, though, he has been a contender in all those races at one point or another. So we got to hold that with him as well. And he has been notorious for being a really good super speedway racer. He got his first victory at Talladega. Granted, it was luck with rain, but he has also backed it up saying, hey, that was not a fluke. I tend to do really good at these types of racetracks. So Bubba Wallace, both his finishes being 14th and 13th. I think you got to keep an eye on how he's doing in stage 1 and stage 2, because in the Daytona 500, he just wasn't that strong that what we're used to seeing in the past. So keep that one in mind. But I still don't think that momentum is lost on him when it comes to these racetracks. I still think at one point in this race, he will be a contender. And to close us out here in the pretty good category, let's include the driver of the number 48 car, Alex Bowman. We can't keep Alex Bowman off this list for too long. He's just been so damn good here this season that he needs to be taken into consideration. Daytona 500, he finished 5th. The Talladega race, the first one, unfortunately he missed the second one. He was able to finish 9th. The most recent race here at Atlanta, he finished 10th. He's been very consistent at top 10s. He's the top 10 guy, and I don't think it won't be long before we see him in victory lane. And just like with William Byron, stay with that momentum. You want that momentum on your side, and if Alex Bowman has good momentum, which he does, I think maybe the penalties that were implemented on Hendrick Motorsports might damage that a little bit. But still, super speedways always can rely on Hendrick cars, and William Byron is going to be a great pick. I think Alex Bowman is going to be right up there in the mix. Maybe not going to be running for the victory, but still going to be in that top 10 mix. And honestly, all these guys in the pretty good categories, yes, they have a bad finish here and there, but overall, they have shown some flashes of potential at either Atlanta Motor Speedway or one of the super speedway tracks. So those are the drivers here in the pretty good category. We got the number 22 of Joey Logano, the number 6 of Brad Keselowski, the number 17 of Chris Buescher, the number 23 of Bubba Wallace, and the number 48 of Alex Bowman. Almost done filling out our roster. We just have 1 or 2 more spots left, and these are the drivers to take a gamble on here this weekend. Let's have some fun with these picks. I think we should grab some drivers we hardly think about using for every single race. Let's mix it up. Let's have some fun here. I got to include this driver. We might use him for more races than we see with some of the other drivers we're about to talk about here, but let's include the number 43 of Eric Jones. It's been a bad start for them. It really has been. They haven't really shown that much competitiveness. They haven't been near the front that we've usually seen in the past. But we still can't take away from the fact that they have been good here at Atlanta for both the races in 2022. Finished 4th in the spring race and finished 14th in the summer race. Talladega, really good at those races. Should have won one of those races. Led on average 24 laps in both those races and finished 6th in both of them. Very consistent. Eric Jones is still worth to take a gamble on. We got to see how he does at the beginning of the race, and we also got to see how he does in qualifying practice. Maybe they may have lost something there with Legacy Motor Club, with the announcement and the driver changes and having Jimmy Johnson as an owner. Maybe that's the case, but we still can't make that confirmed case for that team yet at this time. I still think we got to believe in that number 43 car that he can run well, due to his past results that he has had here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Another driver that we should take a gamble on, it's finally time to include Michael McDowell. Yes, Michael McDowell. It's been an interesting start for that team as well. However, at Phoenix, they started to show potential in going in the right direction. They've been more of a top 20 car at best, and then at the Phoenix race, they were running around the top 15. That's something I like to see for a team like that. But I mean, Michael McDowell is a good super speedway racer, and he kind of showed it at Atlanta last year. Maybe not nearly as strong as what we're used to seeing him at Daytona and Talladega, but still worth in the mix and still worth consideration. He's definitely your garage pick, just for the simple fact that Atlanta is the weakest super speedway for him as far as past results we have seen at the other super speedways. It's still worth consideration, though, for this number 31 car to be on your fantasy roster. So that's the first 2. Now let's include one that I don't think we've hardly talked about at all this year. It's time to include the number 31 of Justin Haley. A lot of drivers who got those L2 penalties seem to be making it onto this list, and Justin Haley is one of them. If there was a track for super speedways, which he has been the best at, it was Atlanta Motor Speedway. He is already a good super speedway racer. We saw it in the Xfinity Series. We just haven't quite seen that at Daytona and Talladega. However, here at Atlanta, things have been pointing in the right direction for this number 31 team. Both times in the mix, in the top 10 throughout the entire race, 7th and 11th in last year's Atlanta races. That's really good for your 5th or 6th pick in your fantasy teams. And I'm telling you, we know we're not using Justin Haley nearly as much as some of these other drivers we talked about. If you've used people like maybe Kyle Busch or Kyle Larson one too many times that you feel like maybe you've used them 4 times already, replace them with Justin Haley. I feel like that's going to be a really smart decision on most people's ends because he has shown in the past few races that he's very consistent. He has ran really good at those races. And here at Atlanta, I'm pretty sure he's going to score you some stage points here and there and should be a good consideration. Keep an eye on that number 31 car. Next up, Spire Motorsports makes it here on the Take a Gamble category. Of course, we're going to include the number 7 of Corey LaJoie. A lot of people have this driver as their one driver for those fantasy leagues where you can only pick one driver in each race of the season. You can never use them again. A lot of people are putting money down that Corey LaJoie is the best option to go with here in this race. And I understand why. He was so good at Atlanta last year. Really, really good. Came this close to winning one of the races. He led 19 laps, was right there on the last lap. Unfortunately, he was not able to seal the deal, but I'm telling you guys, he has been running really good at Atlanta, and we've seen the improvement with this number 7 car. We haven't seen it too much on the 77 car, but with the number 7 car and Corey LaJoie, they have been making some great steps in the right direction, so I feel like they could even be better in this race than they were last year. So they are worth taking a gamble on, and trust me, you're not gonna use Corey LaJoie that much this year, but to use him here in this race, if he pays off big time, that will really help your fantasy league in so many ways. Now we just have one spot left, and I'm in serious debate on who to include in this spot, because there's some really good options here. I know a lot of people might be a little upset that Kyle Busch is not higher on this list. I just know for the fact he absolutely hates this track. And usually when a driver just hates a track a lot, it really gives me concern. We know he does good at Daytona. We've seen some shining moments at Talladega. Here at the new Atlanta, we didn't really see much of that at all in the last 2 races. Sure, he led some laps, but that was about it. In this last spot here, I'm debating between 2 drivers. And they're really close, but I think you got to give it to the most recent winner at Super Speedway race. Let's include Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in the number 47 machine. We know he's a great Super Speedway racer. We've seen it in the past. He is notorious for running up front, leading a few laps there. He's been like Joey Logano, except worse, just has not been able to finish in the top 10. So many people were giving up on him. And then when everyone gives up on him, he wins the Great American Race. Does an unbelievable job. So now we got to consider him once again. Because honestly, if he can show that he can finish the races, trust me, he will be up front. And that team has to feel so much momentum after winning that, especially at super speedway races. Maybe not too much of the intermediate tracks because they know those tracks are a lot different from super speedways. But I bet you coming into this race, they're living on cloud 9 right now. They have all the confidence in the world. And you sometimes need that, especially when you have a driver who does really good at these races in the past. I bet you if Justin Haley won the Daytona 500, I bet you going into this Atlanta race, Kaulig Racing would be like, oh yeah, we're winning this race. And I bet you right now JTG Daughtry Racing is in that same boat. So I think it's worth a gamble on that number 47 car. He's definitely a garage pick because there's still not too much faith as far as him finishing the race, but there's going to be a chance at one point or another that he's going to lead a couple laps here at Atlanta. So those are the 5 drivers to take a gamble on here this weekend. We have the number 43 of Eric Jones, the number 34 of Michael McDowell, the number 31 of Justin Haley, the number 7 of Corey LaJoie, and the number 47 of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And those are the 15 drivers that we feel like are going to be the best options here for this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I think we have some really good options here. Definitely some drivers that you would mostly consider at super speedway races rather than all races. However, people like Ross Chastain, William Byron, and you can also throw in Christopher Bell and Ryan Blaney. We're going to use them a lot more here this season, but with the momentum they have and the potential of scoring as many stage points as we predict that they can, they're still worth a shot to take a gamble on as your top pick this weekend. Now let's talk about the drivers who missed the cut. The other 21 drivers. I keep saying 16. I think that's like the second time in a row I've said that. The 21 drivers who missed the cut on being fantasy picks and why. Let's first start off with the number 2 of Austin Cindric. Austin Cindric, we know his success at super speedways in the past. He's really honestly 50-50 when it comes to these races. And even in his Atlanta results, a third place finish in one race and then 32nd the other one. I don't know if I feel too confident about that. I would feel more confident with his other teammates, like I keep saying over and over, but this time I really do mean it. The number 3 of Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon has not had a good finish here lately at the new Atlanta track. And honestly, at super speedways, he hasn't had the strong finish yet, except for Talladega. He finished 33rd in the Daytona 500 because he was taken out by William Byron. But 2 35th place finishes in the last 2 Atlanta races. Don't feel confident about that at all. The number 4 of Kevin Harvick comes up next. Yes, you know he wants to come back with a vengeance, especially after being that close to winning a race. But I don't think he's going to be really a top 10 contender. He's going to be more of probably like a 14th or 15th car, which is fine, but it's not worth a spot on your fantasy roster. Next up, we have the number 5 of Kyle Larson. I do not understand why he is always considered a top pick as far as casinos go. Everyone says he has the best odds to win the race. He has the best odds. He hasn't done anything at a super speedway. He has one top 5 finish in his entire career, and it was at Talladega. I don't want to go for Kyle Larson. There's way better races to go with right now. Moving on. The number 8 of Kyle Busch. This one killed me. Out of everyone, this one hurt the most. If you want to go with him, if you feel like you're going to see something similar to the Daytona 500, then yes, he's a good driver to take a gamble on. Just for me, honestly, just hearing how much he despises this new layout, it scares me. It scares me to put him on my roster. And based on his past finishes, he has shown that he does not like the new layout. So maybe it's best to sit him out, but if you have faith that he's going to do something similar to the Daytona 500, then include him. Next up, we have the number 9 of Josh Berry. I just don't like substitute drivers. I say it every single time. And right now, Josh Berry could potentially get a top 10. I mean, we know that the 9 car always brings good super speedway cars, but he ain't no Chase Elliott, unfortunately. So maybe it's best to sit him out until Chase Elliott comes back. Next, we have the number 10 of Eric Almirola. We have a top 10 finish in the last Atlanta race, but he's still all over the place. You can't get a consistent finish with him right now, so it's best to leave him out until he starts showing more consistency. The number 11 of Denny Hamlin comes up next. Oh boy, some big names. Well, we all know he's good at super speedways, but he's similar with Kyle Busch. Hasn't had a strong finish here at Atlanta yet, 25th and 29th. Maybe it's best to sit him out and see how he does here in this race. I don't expect him to score high points. He might get a good finish at the end, but I think the safer option is to keep him off for this weekend. The number 14 of Chase Briscoe, he's probably going to get a top 15 finish, probably not many stage points, to be honest with you. It's best to keep him out. There's plenty of other races where he will do better. Then we got the number 15 of J.J. Yaley, best finish being a 25th at a super speedway in the last couple of years. Moving on. The number 16 of A.J. Allmendinger. This was the other driver I wanted to include in the take a chance category. If it wasn't going to be Ricky Stenhouse Jr., it was going to be the number 16. So you can honestly take a gamble on him as well if you want to. He has had some great finish in the Xfinity Series. The only thing that worries me just a little bit is he's not a big fan of super speedways. Again, I know I keep saying that over and over, but that does play a factor with these drivers. There's a chance he could get a top 10 finish. There's a chance he could even get stage points. So honestly, if you want to pick Ricky Stenhouse Jr. or AJ Allmendinger, if you want to sit out Ricky Stenhouse Jr. or Corey LaJoie or Justin Haley, I think AJ Allmendinger would be a good substitute. I think he is just a little bit lower on people's tier lists for this race. Next up, we have the number 19 of Martin Truex Jr. Something's off with Martin Truex Jr. He does have an 11th and 8th place finish here last year, but there's definitely not nearly as much momentum, and even last year the momentum was a little slim for him, so I'm not feeling too confident about Martin Truex Jr. I need to see something come out of him here in these next couple of races before I feel comfortable putting him back on my fantasy roster. The number 21 of Harrison Burton comes in. He's similar with Eric Almirola, does have a top 10 finish last year at this Atlanta race, but the other one, he was running around the 26th position the whole time. Not too comfortable with that. The number 38 of Todd Gilliland, glad he's back in the car. Has one top 10 finish at super speedways. It's best to leave him out here for this weekend. Maybe we'll look at him and Circuit the Americas, but not yet here in this 38 car. Now we got the number 41 of Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece, I don't know. I'm starting to get more nervous about him as time goes by. I thought he was going to do a lot better at Phoenix. I feel way more comfortable including him in Phoenix than I do at a race like this. So sit him out for now. Let's just hope he starts getting more momentum in that 41 car. Then we got the number 42 of Noah Gragson. He seems to be struggling right now. He's like the number 77 car with Legacy Motor Club. You have one car doing decent, and then you have the other car doing really, really bad. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable with Noah Gragson at this time. Definitely having the rookie woes, and he needs to figure more things out. Tyler Reddick, not great finishes at super speedway races. He's starting to get momentum on his side. Those first few races were really bad for him, but he looked really good the last two races. So we might have to start considering him soon, but for now, maybe one more race will sit him out. Next up, we got the number 51 of Cody Ware. Cody Ware's best finish at super speedway in the last 5 races has unfortunately only been a 14th place finish. Yeah, that's a good finish, but definitely not worth a spot on your fantasy roster yet at this time. The number 54 of Ty Gibbs comes up next. Ty Gibbs is still a rookie, still trying to figure things out. Still don't feel comfortable with him yet on our fantasy roster. The number 77 of Ty Dillon comes in. We talked about how much bad luck he has been having with the team. Best to keep him out. And then lastly, we have the number 78 of BJ McLeod. BJ McLeod is just looking to keep his car clean after a really rough finish at Phoenix. So expect him to be hanging around the back end. And if there's a big crash, then maybe he can get a top 20 finish, but we're not going to rely on him as far as fantasy picks go. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all 36 drivers that will be competing in the Ambetter 400 at Atlanta. That will conclude our fantasy picks here for this episode. Guys, thank you so much for listening. It's been a crazy last couple of weeks, hasn't it? I mean, with the Chase Elliott incident, and now with these infraction penalties given to Hendrick Motorsports and Colleague, as well as the Denny Hamlin incident, it's been crazy. It's been absolutely crazy, and just a fun time to be a NASCAR fan, to say the least. So we'll see what comes out of this weekend. I bet it's going to be even crazier because you can never predict what's going to happen at a super speedway race. And with them moving pit road all the way to the entrance of turn 3, that's going to be a race you don't want to miss. If you want to check me out on social media, you can do so on either YouTube, TikTok, or Twitter. On YouTube, I'm getting ready to post another video talking about the most recent injuries in NASCAR and what was the aftermath from them. There is a couple that are missing out on that, as I noticed that there's quite a few driver injuries that made a big impact in the sport. This is probably going to be a 2 or even 3-parter. So we're going to talk about a couple drivers in this episode, and hopefully you guys do enjoy it. It will be sometime near the end of this weekend, but still should be coming out soon on my YouTube channel. Just look up Vanilla Wafers. I will pop up. On TikTok, Vanilla Wafers 44, if you want to see some daily NASCAR content, mostly guest NASCAR driver and fun little videos like that, you can find me on there. Or if you want to talk to me during race day, you can reach out to me on Twitter, again, at Vanilla Wafers. If you have any questions, I love to answer them, and I just love to just spread some random stuff on there during race day. It's usually me not taking it too seriously, but that's the great thing about Twitter. We're probably going to have a couple of episodes coming out here in the next couple of days talking about the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and Cup Series. I like that format. No one really said to me that they didn't like it, so I'm going to keep doing that. If for some reason we want to go back to the one big episode talking about all the races, please let me know. I do want to make sure that you guys are good with it, but if we have longer episodes or longer going into details on each races, I would enjoy doing it like that, but obviously if you guys don't want to, then I'm not going to go that route. Just let me know. But more than likely 3 episodes here for this weekend talking about the Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup Series. And we'll end the episode right there. I have been your host, Vanilla Wafers. Thank you so much for listening. I have been able to lead you to the front of the field, so why don't we grab that checkered flag, do some burnouts, and head on out. So you all take care. This has been the Fantasy Filler Podcast.